Ancient Egypt Part.4. A combination of favorable geographical features contributed to the success of ancient Egyptian culture, the most important of which was the rich fertile soil resulting from annual inundations of the Nile River. The ancient Egyptians were thus able to produce an abundance of food, allowing the population to devote more time and resources to cultural, technological, and artistic pursuits. Land management was crucial in ancient Egypt because taxes were assessed based on the amount of land a person owned. Farming in Egypt was dependent on the cycle of the Nile River. The Egyptians recognized 3 seasons: Akhet flooding, Purit planting, and Shamu harvesting. The flooding season lasted from June to September, depositing on the river's banks a layer of mineral-rich silt ideal for growing crops. After the floodwaters had receded, the growing season lasted from October to February. Farmers plowed and planted seeds in the fields, which were irrigated with ditches and canals. Egypt received little rainfall, so farmers relied on the Nile to water their crops. From March to May, farmers used sickles to harvest their crops, which were then threshed with a flail to separate the straw from the grain. Winnowing removed the chaff from the grain, and the grain was then ground into flour, brewed to make beer, or stored for later use. The ancient Egyptians cultivated emmer and barley, and several other cereal grains, all of which were used to make the 2 main food staples of bread and beer. Flax plants, uprooted before they started flowering, were grown for the fibers of their stems. These fibers were split along their length and spun into thread, which was used to weave sheets of linen and to make clothing. Papyrus growing on the banks of the Nile River was used to make paper. Vegetables and fruits were grown in garden plots, close to habitations and on higher ground, and had to be watered by hand. Vegetables included leeks, garlic, melons, squashes, pulses, lettuce, and other crops, in addition to grapes that were made into wine. The Egyptians believed that a balanced relationship between people and animals was an essential element of the cosmic order. Thus humans, animals, and plants were believed to be members of a single whole. Animals, both domesticated and wild, were therefore a critical source of spirituality, companionship, and sustenance to the ancient Egyptians. Cattle were the most important livestock. The administration collected taxes on livestock in regular censuses, and the size of a herd reflected the prestige and importance of the state or temple that owned them. In addition to cattle, the ancient Egyptians kept sheep, goats, and pigs. Poultry, such as ducks, geese, and pigeons, were captured in nets and bred on farms, where they were force-fed with dough to fatten them. The Nile provided a plentiful source of fish. Bees were also domesticated from at least the Old Kingdom, and provided both honey and wax. The ancient Egyptians used donkeys and oxen as beasts of burden, and they were responsible for plowing the fields and trampling seed into the soil. The slaughter of a fattened ox was also a central part of an offering ritual. Horses were introduced by the Hyksos in the Second Intermediate Period. Camels, although known from the New Kingdom, were not used as beasts of burden until the late period. There is also evidence to suggest that elephants were briefly used in the late period, but largely abandoned due to lack of grazing land. Cats, dogs, and monkeys were common family pets, while more exotic pets imported from the heart of Africa, such as sub-Saharan African lions, were reserved for royalty. Herodotus observed that the Egyptians were the only people to keep their animals with them in their houses during the late period. The worship of the gods in their animal form was extremely popular, such as the cat goddess Bastet and the ibis god Thoth. And these animals were kept in large numbers for the purpose of ritual sacrifice. Egypt is rich in building and decorative stone, copper and lead ores, gold, and semi-precious stones. These natural resources allowed the ancient Egyptians to build monuments, sculpt statues, make tools, and fashion jewelry. Embalmers used salts from the Wadi Natron for mummification, which also provided the gypsum needed to make plaster. Ore-bearing rock formations were found in distant, inhospitable wadis in the eastern desert and the Sinai, requiring large, state-controlled expeditions to obtain natural resources found there. There were extensive gold mines in Nubia, and one of the first maps known is of a gold mine in this region. The Wadi Hammamet was a notable source of granite, greywack, and gold. Flint was the first mineral collected and used to make tools. And flint hand axes are the earliest pieces of evidence of habitation in the Nile Valley. Nodules of the mineral were carefully flaked to make blades and arrowheads of moderate hardness and durability even after. Copper was adopted for this purpose. Ancient Egyptians were among the first to use minerals, such as sulfur as cosmetic substances. The Egyptians worked deposits of the lead or galena at Gebel Roses to make net sinkers, plumb bobs, and small figurines. Copper was the most important metal for toolmaking in ancient Egypt, and was smelted in furnaces from malachite or mined in the Sinai. Workers collected gold by washing the nuggets out of sediment in alluvial deposits, or by the more labor-intensive process of grinding and washing gold-bearing quartzite. Iron deposits found in Upper Egypt were used in the late period. High-quality building stones were abundant in Egypt. The ancient Egyptians quarried limestone all along the Nile Valley, granite from Aswan, and basalt and sandstone from the Wadis of the Eastern Desert. Deposits of decorative stones such as porphyry, greywack, alabaster, and carnelian dotted the Eastern Desert and were collected even before the First Dynasty. In the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, miners worked deposits of emeralds in Wadi Sikat and amethyst in Wadi el-Hudi. The ancient Egyptians engaged in trade with their foreign neighbors to obtain rare, exotic goods not found in Egypt. In the pre-dynastic period, they established trade with Nubia to obtain gold and incense. They also established trade with Palestine, as evidenced by Palestinian-style oil jugs found in the burials of the First Dynasty pharaohs. An Egyptian colony stationed in southern Canaan dates to slightly before the First Dynasty. Narmer had Egyptian pottery produced in Canaan and exported back to Egypt by the Second Dynasty at latest. Ancient Egyptian trade with Byblos yielded a critical source of quality timber not found in Egypt. By the Fifth Dynasty, trade with Punt provided gold, aromatic resins, ebony, ivory, and wild animals such as monkeys and baboons. Egypt relied on trade with Anatolia for essential quantities of tin as well as supplementary supplies of copper, both metals being necessary for the manufacture of bronze. The ancient Egyptians prized the blue stone lapis lazuli, which had to be imported from faraway Afghanistan. Egypt's Mediterranean trade partners also included Greece and Crete, which provided, among other goods, supplies of olive oil. The Egyptian language is a northern Afroasiatic language, closely related to the Berber and Semitic languages. It has the longest known history of any language, having been written from c. 30 to 100 BC to the Middle Ages, and remaining as a spoken language for longer. The phases of ancient Egyptian are Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Classical Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. Egyptian writings do not show dialect differences before Coptic, but it was probably spoken in regional dialects around Memphis and later Thebes. Ancient Egyptian was a synthetic language, but it became more analytic later on. Late Egyptian developed prefixal definite and indefinite articles, which replaced the older inflectional suffixes. There was a change from the older verb subject-object word order to subject-verb-object. The Egyptian hieroglyphic, hieratic, and demotic scripts were eventually replaced by the more phonetic Coptic alphabet. Coptic is still used in the liturgy of the Egyptian Orthodox Church, and traces of it are found in modern Egyptian Arabic. Ancient Egyptian has 25 consonants, similar to those of other Afroasiatic languages. These include pharyngeal and emphatic consonants, voiced and voiceless stops, voiceless fricatives, and voiceless affricates. It has 3 long and 3 short vowels, which expanded in Late Egyptian to about 9. The basic word in Egyptian, similar to Semitic and Berber, is a triliteral or biliteral root of consonants and semiconsonants. Suffixes are added to form words. The verb conjugation corresponds to the person. For example, the triconsonantal skeleton SWM is the semantic core of the word hear. Its basic conjugation is he hears. If the subject is a noun, suffixes are not added to the verb swmmt, the woman hears. Adjectives are derived from nouns through a process that Egyptologists call nispation because of its similarity with Arabic. The word order is predicate-subject in verbal and adjectival sentences, and subject-predicate in nominal and adverbial sentences. The subject can be moved to the beginning of sentences if it is long and is followed by a resumptive pronoun. Verbs and nouns are negated by the particle n, but n is used for adverbial and adjectival sentences. Stress falls on the ultimate or penultimate syllable, which can be open CV or closed CVC. Hieroglyphic writing dates from 3000 BC and is composed of hundreds of symbols. A hieroglyph can represent a word, a sound, or a silent determinative, and the same symbol can serve different purposes in different contexts. Hieroglyphs were a formal script used on stone monuments and in tombs that could be as detailed as individual works of art. In day-to-day writing, scribes used a cursive form of writing called hieratic, which was quicker and easier, while formal hieroglyphs may be read in rows or columns in either direction, though typically written from right to left. Hieratic was always written from right to left, usually in horizontal rows. A new form of writing, demotic, became the prevalent writing style. And it is this form of writing along with formal hieroglyphs that accompany the Greek text on the Rosetta Stone, around the 1st century AD. The Coptic alphabet started to be used alongside the Demotic script. Coptic is a modified Greek alphabet with the addition of some Demotic signs, although formal hieroglyphs were used in a ceremonial role. Until the 4th century, towards the end, only a small handful of priests could still read them. As the traditional religious establishments were disbanded, knowledge of hieroglyphic writing was mostly lost. Attempts to decipher them date to the Byzantine and Islamic periods in Egypt, but only in the 1820s. After the discovery of the Rosetta Stone and years of research by Thomas Young and Jean-François Champollion, were hieroglyphs substantially deciphered. Writing first appeared in association with kingship on labels and tags for items found in royal tombs. It was primarily an occupation of the scribes, who worked out of the per-ank institution, or the House of Life. The latter comprised offices, libraries called House of Books, laboratories, and observatories. Some of the best-known pieces of ancient Egyptian literature, such as the pyramid and coffin texts, were written in classical Egyptian, which continued to be the language of writing until about 1300 BC. Late Egyptian was spoken from the New Kingdom onward and is represented in Ramesside administrative documents, love poetry and tales, as well as in Demotic and Coptic texts. During this period, the tradition of writing had evolved into the tomb autobiography, such as those of Harkuf and Weni. The genre known as Sabate instructions was developed to communicate teachings and guidance from famous nobles. De Pure Papyrus, a poem of lamentations describing natural disasters and social upheaval, is a famous example. The story of Sinew, written in Middle Egyptian, might be the classic of Egyptian literature. Also written at this time was the Westcar Papyrus, a set of stories told to Khufu by his sons, relating the marvels performed by priests. The Instruction of Amenemop is considered a masterpiece of Near Eastern literature. Towards the end of the New Kingdom, the vernacular language was more often employed to write popular pieces like the story of Weneman and the Instruction of Eni. The former tells the story of a noble who was robbed on his way to buy cedar from Lebanon and of his struggle to return to Egypt. From about 700 BC, narrative stories and instructions, such as the popular instructions of Anshishonki, as well as personal and business documents, were written in the Demotic script and phase of Egyptian. Many stories written in Demotic during the Greco-Roman period were set in previous historical eras, when Egypt was an independent nation ruled by great pharaohs such as Ramesses II. Thanks for watching.